Rob Lubow and Dustin Dye. Come on.
Hey guys, so this is our third year here, and it's kind of exciting to be in New York. Each year it gets more exciting because we're really all pioneers in this space. And to have everybody here, there's people. I talked to Edgar, he's coming in from Mexico City. RoboCopy's coming in from Amsterdam. It's an exciting space to be in. We're Bot Copy. Bot Copy is a software that has a rich web chat UI for dialog flow. So we accept all Google Assistant, all Google Actions response types, as you can see there, and we put them in your own custom white labeled widget on your website. So all sorts of cool tips and tricks we can talk about later. This talk is actually going to be about conversational design and UX. Rob's an award-winning copywriter. He's our co-founder at Bot Copy, so he'll be running most of this conversation. But yeah, that's who we are.
Right.
Yeah. Alex is kind of giving
Okay, so we have deep roots in writing and conversational design. So we're very happy to be joined by so many conversational designers in the audience. We've also done our share of programming and engineering and reviewing data sets, and we've worked with enterprise companies, and now we're a software company. So we can identify with a lot of people in the audience, from the freelance writer who's kind of figuring out, do I want to bring my talents into the bot space, all the way to, like a Walmart that's trying to figure out a strategy that works for automating different systems and reducing costs and boosting revenue, which is really why I think this industry exists. Having said that, we're going to start all the way at the beginning of the story with the writing piece. I'm a copywriter, creative director from the agency world, where I used to write TV and radio and print, and I was drawn to the AI space because I just love AI, and I think how cool it would be to write for robots. What I didn't realize was it's not a linear thing, it's a tangential thing with digressions and fractals, and it can get very complex. So as a writer, you're looking at a whole different idiom that you have to learn. So there's some things that bear repeating, just some basics about writing for dialogue, for bots. And I think there's a deck that's coming up here. So we'll blur through these really quickly because you know them already, but they bear repeating, I think. Let's go to that bus one.
Yeah, so
okay.
We'll start with the audience. So go ahead and take
Yeah, so clarity. If people don't know what you're talking about, the bot breaks. So this is what we call an amphibly, I believe. It's a kind of ambiguity in writing. The folder was on the bus, but now it's gone. Are we talking about the bus, or are we talking about the folder? Okay, so and the reason I point this out is, again, you can look at data and you can look at how people respond to your bot and then change it later, but your first generation bot, the one you first put out there, needs to have strong writing, or else you'll never get the escape velocity, I believe, to get people to come back. Your most important users, the ones who bothered to find you, be the first ones there. So that's why good writing, good grammar is important, so that people know what you're talking about. In this case, we don't know if it's the folder or the bus.
And when you're designing this kind of conversation, like this sentence in particular, when you're thinking about what's going to be the follow-up, like what's the user going to ask, like what problems do you run into, this scenario being a bus or a folder, but as like a writer, like what are you thinking about what the answer could be, and how does that affect like your response?
You look at this sentence and you ask yourself reasonably, what could somebody ask about this sentence? A reasonable question would be, are you talking about the folder, or are you talking about the bus, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have to use a sentence like this, make sure you have a follow-up that anticipates that reasonable request. In fact, we'll get more into that. Writing for bots is about anticipating reasonable questions. And that's when people get frustrated, when you can't answer a reasonable question. If they throw up an unreasonable question and you don't know it, then it's really not your fault. Concision. Okay, now that we've got the subject of clarity squared away, let's move on to the critical topic of being quick and concise. I've been writing for 20 years, and I do this every single day. This is important for the writers in the room who are writing for bots, where the attention span of the user is way smaller than any other idiom I've ever worked in, as well as the people who are hiring writers. Make sure you hire the best writers who understand editing and concision. this is going to show up on a phone, and it's going to look really like a big, thick paragraph. So writing for bots is 50% is cutting it down. Use Hemingway.com. That'll keep your sentences really short. And finally, tone. There's a lot of discussion about what's my brand voice, and you can spend months analyzing what the exact brand voice should be. In my experience, it's really clear, concise, upbeat. That's the brand voice in 99% of the time. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ways of saying the same thing. You can't read it in the back, I know, because I was in the back the whole time. But the first one, it says, this is a great idea, Marilyn. A meeting is a fantastic place to start. Please click the button below to select a time most convenient to you. And then you can hit set up a call. All these in the middle, they're pared down more. Let's skip to this one. This one says, cool, let's get this party started. Set up a call. This one says, no prob, smiley face, set up a call. Those are different tones of voice. Writers spend a lot of time thinking about which tone of voice makes sense in this moment. That's all they do, character and dialogue writers. So that's a long-winded kind of gadgety one, and this is a really short one. These are the kind of decisions that you'll have to make and see what works.
So you've done work for American Express, for Wire, for all sorts of different brands. Like, what can you say in the bot space in particular, where you're looking at an audience, you're looking at who you're speaking to, and when you approach that, it was a traditional ad, but how do you take the same like thought process and concept and put it into like AI?
So we have a client at Bot Copy, right, Oxygo, which is an portable oxygen machine. So we know that our market have trouble breathing. Chances are they might be elderly or struggling with some kind of disease. So we know that we can't use younger jargon. We can't take kind of like a smart alecky tone. These are people who are struggling with breathing, and they want answers, and they're frustrated, and they might be cranky. And I even know as I get older, I get kind of cranky, and I talk too much, and I ask questions, and I get paranoid. And last night at the hotel, I was yelling at the woman who checked me in because screwed up my reservation. So you can kind of expect that with Oxygo. You're going to get all these questions. So, you know, you have to know your market and then modulate the voice to be warm and fuzzy with this market. With another company, let's say we're working with HP, you know, and it's enterprise. We're talking to geeks, you know, we're talking to people who want to hear all the tech stuff and they want to get right to the point. So it's pretty similar to any marketing brief.
Yeah, we tried with Oxygo kind of being fluffy at first. Taking like the more cute and charming, like let's be nice and help these people get the medical devices they wanted. And the results weren't that good. You know, we launched it, the conversion rate was relatively low, and then we quickly changed up all the copy to be very punchy. Like I think the initial call to action for the bot prompt at the bottom was like, you know, here if you need us, like happy to like help, with like a cute little smiley face. Like
it was breathe easy, we're here to help, and it had a face, it was a woman's face, looked kind of like a doctor.
Like, it's a breathing apparatus, so breathe easy was kind of a pun. It didn't work, you know, so we changed it up, like get answers now, you know, we're here. That worked like really well. So sometimes you're gonna launch and realize that even though you spend a lot of creative time building whatever you're building, it might not work. So use analytic tools, look at it, and keep reiterating and revising, and don't think that whatever you launch with is going to be the thing that you stick with. It's not. I'll go ahead and take this one because to me it's the most important. In 2016, when we were playing primarily with Facebook Messenger experiences and just getting into the space, I realized that there's this huge void and opportunity for creative writers to come in to AI. Like, how cool? Who the hell gets to write Siri? Who's writing Alexa? You know, there's some opportunity there. You know, so we quickly started Bot Copy to kind of capture that market share, and we wanted to do everything, you know. And we started doing these builds and just wanted to make it fun and really had no objective in the beginning. And that doesn't work, you know. So don't do that. You know, what we had then started doing is every client that we would work with, we'd look at specific KPIs, and every single conversation would be measured side by side with, how it worked prior to launch, how it worked, during launch. And you can get creative with these KPIs. There's a lot of analytic tools that, we'll talk about in a little bit. But don't just base it on, the number of conversations or how long, it went for. There's really particular things that you can look at. One was we went side by side with the call center, and we were measuring how many calls, came in. We thought that was like the KPI to look at. Okay, like how many calls are we getting before? How many calls are we getting after? And we realized that they were relatively the same, and we were pretty frustrated. It wasn't until we looked into the calls and realized what they were calling about and how long that they were chatting for then that we realized it was actually a way bigger success than we thought. The calls were like they wanted to purchase, and they wanted to purchase with a human. They only had 1 or 2 questions. All the FAQs and all that shit was kind of was taken care of by the bot. So it was a win, but we kind of had our KPIs wrong just comparing like number of calls that were coming into the call center. So spend a lot of time here because it's easy to just want to get creative and write something cute and fluffy and fun and answer a bunch of questions. And if it's not tied to something, your creative efforts are going nowhere. Cool. And that's where we kind of get in, and this is blurry, but this is a map of just an onboarding experience. Now, it had a lot of decision tree basics and functionality in the beginning, but it's where we kind of put a turning point in our company where we realized that if we really want to get creative, if we really want to leverage the power of good writing and where bots can, we need to start turning to NLP platforms. We need to start looking at not just copywriting and creative, but context. And that's kind of what the NLP, and if you want to...
So yeah, this was kind of when we evolved from focusing on text or copy to context. It's hard to explain, but even what you're seeing here is only scratching the surface of the actual full architecture of a conversation. Like as I mentioned before, bot conversations are tangential and nonlinear. And
so why clickbots, or why NLP over clickbots?
Okay, so you would think that if you created a button bot with multi-level choices, people would behave and they'd click the button. But we found out that roughly 60 to 80% don't. They'll type in a query, and it's always a surprising query. And we don't mind if it's a query like, what's your favorite color? Because that's not relevant to the use case. What gets us feeling guilty is when someone types in a query that is entirely relevant to the use case and we can't answer it. That's when people start getting frustrated and leave. So we had to have a way to do that. An NLP engine like Dialogflow, for instance, was the only way that we could attack that problem.
So here's kind of a better example of that. This is one of your Amazon articles, so if you want to take this one as well.
Sure. Well, so this is a bot that we built, and it's like, what is bot copy? Okay, so take us, for example. We went through this ourselves because this is our bot. We built on Dialogflow, and we describe what bot copy is. It lets your Google Dialogflow agent run on a rich featured front-end web chat that puts you in control, okay? There's a little bit of jargon in there, so if one of the users actually wrote in English, being a smart aleck, like, I don't get what you're saying. So we see that incoming response, and we're like, oh, they're right. We need to say this more clear. At least we have to have a backup in case someone doesn't get it. So we go back and we create a follow-up for in English. And by the way, 200 ways of saying in English, like, I don't get it, or what does that mean, or say it clearer, or what is Dialogflow, or what's a front-end web chat. So we train all those phrases to trigger this. My apologies, in simple terms, and then it goes on to explain it in simple terms. So no one said this was easy, but that's the backup in case. So the way we do this is we mention the word widget in this one here. So we have to highlight, we have to look at each single word in this intent, in this response, and ask ourselves, could this word bother someone? Could it prompt someone to ask a reasonable question? And we have the word widget in here. And we actually thought someone might not know what a widget is. So let's create an intent for what's a widget in case someone says, what's a widget? And sure enough, someone did. WTF is a widget. And we had the response ready to go. Nobody's asked me that before. I guess I'd say a widget is a self-contained mini program that lives and runs on your website app. So we're very picky about making sure that we can answer any reasonable question. And you can mathematically figure out what all the reasonable questions are that are embedded in your response by going word for word and asking yourself, can this elicit a reasonable question? And then programming follow-ups and intents for those follow-ups, and even follow-ups for the follow-ups, in order to make sure that your bot is bulletproof and can answer every reasonable question. It can be done. Don't let anyone tell you it can't be done, or that you have to take a shortcut, or that you shouldn't do really, really long follow-up arrays. If you're a new conversational designer, push as far as you can. Put in those extra 2 or 3 days to make your bot bulletproof, instead of saying, you know what, that sounds too complicated, we're just gonna give up and go, just send them to to an FAQ or something. I think that.
But we often hear, we have people call us every day, and we hear their counter argument with, the clickbot solutions that are out there that, what the fuck is a widget? They don't care. Why don't we want them to get down one particular path. We don't want to put up anything else. Here's the KPI, hit that. Why would you want NLP to go outside of these bumpers and do that?
Well, if someone says, what is your product? You try to answer as best you can. You want to answer in a way that's not going to elicit somebody's confusion. So some of your responses will have, it's a necessary evil. It's going to have to be unpacked a little bit.
Yeah.
But from a copywriting standpoint, you want to get good at writing responses that can't be unpacked. And that kind of drives somebody into the next question you want them to ask.
So you want to loop them back into that KPI eventually, but
For
if
sure.
they go outside, have a reasonable response to get them back in.
Right.
And how do you go about doing that without, feeding them on and on forever and ever? Because if you answer the question about, WTF is a widget, then it's pretty reasonable that this person just asked the same thing twice. They might take, another context out of the sentence and then bring it back. So what are some design tricks to get them to come back in?
Well, this last one, it's pretty much done. There's really nothing more anyone could say about that. Mm-hmm. So then the person wrote, got it, what else? Yeah. Which is a pretty open-ended question, but we have an intent trained for that. Got it, what else is one of the training phrases for what can you do, or what does this bot do? Yeah. So it triggered this intent. Please ask me about bot copy. I can talk about our product, or I could talk about AI. And most responses end with that sentence. Please ask me about bot copy or AI.
And when you've seen in this kind of scenario, so we offer the ability to type, so they could go off the rails and do this. But we've also have suggestion chips and all sorts of other things that Google provides. Mm-hmm. What have you seen being more successful? Let's say that they asked this, this example, we didn't put a suggestion chip. Wouldn't it be pretty reasonable to say, hey, I hope that answered your question. Do you want to get back to, maybe giving us your email or setting up a call?
Right.
Is that
if that's the KPI to get their email, we'll say, that's all I know about this subject. Why don't you give me your email and we can talk more?
Fair.
And be ready for them to say no.
So we've seen people start at really two different spots. One is they've got some really complex NLP built out and it's up and running and we can get it up in two or three clicks. And then they're full call center still, and they have nothing and don't really know where to start. So usually we look at that from okay, you have 100% live chat on your customer service side, and you're trying to get to 25% or 10%. I think it's hard to say that it's going to replace 100%. It's always good to train your AI based on what you're able to facilitate to your live chat. But that's typically how we look at it. Make a curve, understand, and back to some of those objectives and things we were talking about. know where you're trying to go, understand how your live chat call centers or however they're communicating. Look at how they're answering some of those things, and always make it so it's, if you're a company, whether it's internal or external chat facing, make sure that you're designing and training on costs that you're cutting, profits boosting, and delighting customers in some way, because customer retention is huge. If we can keep our customers longer, it's easier than closing new ones. So chatbots are amazing for doing that. Leverage them for that, but be very specific on how you're training, and don't try to build too much in the beginning, or you're going to get overwhelmed. It's not going to work. If you're presenting it to like one of your project managers, all sorts of people are going to ask it all sorts of crazy things, and you're not going to be able to come back. So to kind of wrap things up, I think this is one of the last slides. One of the most important things that people overlook is the top of the funnel. It's not just the chat experience. It's also, where the hell is the chat experience? Is it on your website? Is it triggered through a QR code? How are people interacting? And get creative with that, because they're not necessarily going to know to go to your Alexa skill or your Google Home or on your website or your Facebook Messenger page. So play around with some of those. Each medium is very different. Facebook Messenger is cool, but putting Facebook Messenger plugin on your website, I'm not sold on. Mandating people log in through Messenger just to chat with you when they came to your domain first, I don't know. I think there's a little bit of an issue there. There's plenty of solutions. We're one of them. You can have your own native live chat on your website and have two different mediums. You can have a web chat with a bot. You can have Google Assistant. You can have Facebook Messenger. But understand why people are interacting there and what they want to accomplish. Because I've seen a lot of different builds, and each medium is a little different. You answer a call differently than you answer an email. So understand that when you're designing AI as well.
Okay. Can I say?
And most importantly, as we wrap it up, again, be very specific on your chat goals. Otherwise, you're going to build something with no KPIs, and it's just not going to work.
Can I make a quick prediction, just
Yes.
to wrap it up?
Yes.
Dustin's a great CEO, and we sometimes disagree. I don't think there are that many other options to what we're doing. The prediction is that there's going to be a new generation of conversational designers who are going to master frameworks like Dialogflow with intents, entities, fulfillment, context. That's, to me, the best way to make sure your bot doesn't break. I think brands are going to realize that they want to be on websites because it's an easy place to go. You don't have to log in. You don't have to be a member. You don't have to download an app. You don't have to pay data charges on your phone. It's an open channel with no friction, so why not go talk to a smart bot on your website that doesn't look like a Facebook Messenger plugin, but actually looks like your brand. And so from our journey as writers all the way to software developers, that's our prediction. There are other great companies. If you're not looking for a complicated bot, like you can go to something like a Smart Loop, which is a fantastic product.'re big fans of Rasa. But that's my prediction. Connecting NLP bots to websites.
Cool. I'm going to wrap it up. Do we have time for questions, or?
Yeah, of course we do.
Cool.
All right, platform first, let's go.
You guys want to take one question?
Steal my mic, I'll show you. All right, we have a... So it's funny when you see different questions. Some of them are like this, some of them are like this. And this question, watch, this is what it looked like. That means it's very thought through. It's very, I have a high hopes for this question. So you don't think about it, but I judge you by the way that you raise your hand. Here you go.
Such a big build-up. So you've mentioned the live chat, and I was curious in the way to write copy for the chatbot versus for the live agent. So if the implementation allows a handoff from a bot to an agent, do we need to look at how agents are responding and maybe make tweaks there? Is it the same tweaks, or is it in the same spirit as how the bot would respond versus how the agent does?
It's a great question.
I told you it was a great question. Sorry.
I think the key to that question is understanding how good agents are responding, because everybody does kind of respond differently. Most sales agents are reading off of a script still, but they do go off the script. They do answer things differently. So most of those calls are being recorded for quality purposes. Most of those companies never listen to those calls. It's a really good place to start. For instance, right here when we're training, I pulled this up because we're looking at, this is one of a client, this was Redbox. So basically Redbox had a whole bunch of FAQs that we were looking at. They had a whole bunch of costs, and we were able to analyze based on how much time each agent was spending on, like their number one FAQ was, my disk is scratched, how do I fix it? And they were getting that like 40,000 minutes a day. So that was a huge bill for them. A pretty easy chatbot to build, actually, to how to facilitate the fix on that. Spit the disk, wash it on your thing, put it back in, see if it works. But we were able to say, okay, let's not predict that the AI is going to take out like 100% of that, but let's just say 60%. How much is that a cost savings to the business? And how did that bot do it successfully compared to the live chat? Because if you launch it and you have a 60%, like the AI says, here's how you fix your disk, step 1, step 2, step 3, and 60% of the people don't ask any other questions, it works, it's a pretty big win, because the AI savings, $7,000, I don't know if this was per day or per month or what it was, but look at those types of numbers, and do start with the transcripts that you get from the live chat, because it's pretty valuable if it's already working. Yeah, any other question?
Why is the mic not working? The answer is it wasn't turned on. Where? Oh, in the front. Somebody who's excited about accelerating their growth in the front row.
I have lots of questions. We found that people were kind of missing that our bot was a bot. So one of the things that we're trying to do is transfer or move from the language of I, in bot responses, to the language of we as the company. Have you guys seen any other common pitfalls from just unintended consequences of specific word choices like that?
Common pitfalls. Well, yeah, we're a big fan of we language. But if you're trying to establish rapport, then you can switch to I language. If you're trying to establish credibility and ability to, perform a job as a company, then it's we language. So it just depends on the goal of the bot. Other pitfalls of language.
So just a caveat, the state of California, you actually have to declare that it's a bot, like up front. So sometimes that works, sometimes then you can take the bot on as a persona, but I like the we idea. Like it seems, how is it working? You haven't done this yet? Happy to take a look, see how natural it feels, sounds.
Okay, so I have an exercise for everybody, because we all should work out. Everyone, take your name badge and remove it. Flip it around 180 degrees. Take out your phone on the other hand. Take out your scanner. Scan the back of your card. Ready? It'll be like competition. Who can do it first? Ready, go. Bzz, 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 bzz. Scan, scan, scan. What you are scanning is a bot built by Bot Copy for the Chatbot Conference to give you an idea of some of this conversational design in action. Scan it, start the conversation, scan it, good. I'll give you a raffle ticket, I promise. And again, what I think is interesting from how many non-tech people do we have in here? Okay, just you. Then they're too busy scanning. See, it takes us longer to do these simple things like scanning, right? What's interesting, what I'm seeing is that you have the back end, you have the middle end, and then you have the front end. And so what I'm seeing, because I've been to these conferences too, is at what point do you leverage pre-built information to patch in what you want with other information? So I think Bot Copy is an interesting example of where you can plug and play in this larger scheme. So you can play with that bot with the Chatbot Conference, and I challenge you to challenge the bot and see where the conversation goes. All right? Give it up for these two people right here, changing the world one bot at a time, whether you bought it or not.